Okay, welcome everyone. I know we've already been introduced, and of course, it's been a little while, I think, Graham and Sandra, since you've spent much time together. So, welcome to the mediation today. So we've all signed the mediation agreement. Just wanted to remind you a little bit about the rules in the mediation agreement, so that we've all heard it together, and just to talk a little bit about the process today and our respective roles. Okay, so I think that the first thing is that we're all here to try and reach a resolution of the issues between you. I know you've both worked hard to get to this point, and it's an opportunity today to try and work together to resolve the issues so that you can both move on with your lives, and most importantly, Sam and Florence can move on with their lives too. So just to remind you that what we talk about today will be confidential, private, and in legal language privileged without prejudice. So you can talk freely, we can explore options, and you know that if we don't reach an agreement today, you're not going to be held to any of that. There are some exceptions to that. You know, if there's any illegality, if any of us are concerned that somebody might be at a significant risk of harm, or if one of you discloses an asset that's not been disclosed previously, then that is something that can be referred to outside of the room. But all the discussions about trying to resolve your issues are private. And also, I just emphasise my role in this as a mediator. You know, I'm neutral. I don't actually mind what happens today. I want to help you both to reach a resolution. But you know, I'm not going to take sides. I'm here to support both of you to try and find a way through this. I'll manage the process, but the content really is up to you two and your lawyers. I'm going to challenge you, perhaps at times reality test, and I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can to try and get you to a resolution today. And all I ask is that you will work as hard as well to reach that compromise. And it might be helpful to know that there's a recent survey of the Civil Mediation Council showed that 93% of cases settle either in mediation or very shortly afterwards. So let's hope that we can all make that your case be one of those, that 93% today. Okay, your role really is you've got a shared problem here. There are issues between you that need to be resolved. And just ask that you work hard to try and achieve that, and to be open to compromise, because that's what we're going to need to try and get to a resolution working together today. There's one important difference about this process compared with some of the others that there are, and that is that as a mediator, I can actually hold confidences between the two of you. So hopefully when we meet after this meeting in separate rooms, you'll feel able to share with me those areas in which you are willing to compromise. And I will check with you before I go back to the other room whether I can share any of that or not. And that gives me the opportunity to see where there might be some scope for crossover between the situations you both find yourself in and the compromises that you're each prepared to make. Okay. Just to reassure you though, I won't be sharing anything like any compromises that you are willing to make without checking with you first that I may share those. And I'll share them when I think it's most likely to help to get a resolution. Okay, so we're going to start off. I'm going to ask Joe and Graham first of all to say why you're here, what you want to achieve today, what the main issues are, just briefly, and then I'll come to you, Sandra and Maddie, to do that as well. Okay, so over to you, Joe, Graham.
Okay, well, thank you, Alison, for that, and also Graham wanted to express that he's grateful for Sandra and Maddie attending today. And we've talked at length prior to today's meeting, and Graham is genuinely very hopeful that there's a way to resolve the situation and find a solution that everyone's happy with, and obviously with Sam and Florence at the forefront of everybody's mind. We've already been through a process where we've agreed the value of all the assets, and for us, from our perspective, we think that there's 4 principal issues that really need addressing today. The first is Sandra's income. We're conscious that at the moment there is a shortfall in terms of the income that she earns and the outgoings that she's got. But Graham does feel that there is some scope there for Sandra to increase her working hours. We are conscious that Florence will be going to secondary school fairly soon, and that might be a good opportunity. So we do need to look at how long Sandra needs interim support for herself and at what stage, there's that step back from that and she just received child maintenance. The second issue is the inheritance, which of course has been discussed in some detail already in the correspondence that we've exchanged in the past. That is an inheritance that came from Graham's father after the marriage had broken down, and Graham does feel very strongly that that isn't a matrimonial asset and shouldn't be available for sharing. Third issue is pensions. There's an acceptance entirely from Graham's point of view that pensions need to be shared and that his pension pot will need to be subject to a pension sharing order, but there's a question over whether it might be appropriate to exclude some of the contributions that were made to that pension post-separation. And lastly, there's the issue of the business interests. Graham is currently minded to potentially look at selling the partnership if that was something Sandra was interested in doing. And in terms of the limited companies, we need to have a conversation around whether or not they're retained in full by Graham. He knows that Sandra has a preference for cash assets, but if that's the case, that he would want some kind of acceptance that he's then left with much more risk-laden assets. And that's really the main issues that we think we want to cover. Graham, have you got anything you'd like to add at all?
Not really. You've covered that really well. Just probably the inheritance. I feel quite strongly about that. My father felt quite strongly about that on his deathbed. So, yeah, I'd leave it at that, I think.
Okay, thank you. So, Sandra, Maddie.
Thank you. Just to echo Jo, your thanks to you and to Graham for attending. Sandra is also hopeful that we can reach some compromise today on some, if not all, of the issues. It's really positive that you are both here. I think you've identified, Jo, the issues that are still outstanding that we need to resolve, and you've seen our mediation position, so you're aware of Sandra's position on all of those things. The first thing that you mentioned was obviously the income, and this is something that is really important for Sandra that the parties need to compromise on and to get right. And Sandra's main feeling about this is that this is an agreement. Sandra's current working hours and her current financial position is something that was agreed between Sandra and Graham during their marriage, is as how they would operate their family and how they would raise their children. And it's really important to Sandra that as part of this process, Graham will accept and consider the fact that Florence is slightly more shy, and yes, she's due to start secondary school soon, but it's likely to take her a little bit of time to get settled. And it's that period that Sandra is most concerned about in terms of increasing her working hours. There is an acceptance that she will be able to increase her hours once Florence is at secondary school, but probably not straight away. So I think you're right, we can certainly talk about the timings of that today, but that's Sandra's main concern really in all of this. In terms of the inheritance, Sandra does accept that there's a lot of sentiment to that asset, it's not just cash, and she appreciates that this was received by Graham, for Graham, and it was received after the marriage. Where it becomes something to consider in slightly more detail, I think, is really when we're looking at the businesses, which is another thing that we need to obviously get to the bottom of today. Sandra's quite content in theory to the partnership to be sold and for that to be distributed. Where we are likely to need to have more discussions is in relation to limited companies. Obviously, all of the shares rest with Graham. Sandra has had nothing to do with those businesses, and frankly, you're happy for me to say this, we've discussed it already, she doesn't understand them. She doesn't want those shares. It's going to be very difficult, Sandra and I have discussed, if shares were to be given to Sandra in order to equalise some of that value that rests with Graham. Not least because as a shareholder in a company, it's going to maintain some ongoing ties between the two of you, and that needs to be considered. But Sandra does appreciate that there's more risk in the businesses than there are in the sort of copper-bottomed cash assets, and we're willing to consider that in terms of values. But in terms of the inheritance, Sandra's position is that if Graham wants to retain certain assets, if he wants to limit the amount of maintenance that he's paying for a period of time, there is cash there that is available for him to use. And so that's really how it's playing into Sandra's feelings and thoughts coming into this process. Just very quickly in terms of the pensions, Sandra appreciates Graham's thoughts and his comments that he's worked hard and he's contributed and he's done so after the marriage, and that's fully accepted. But really Sandra's position again plays back to her income position, that Sandra's hours and her current income is something that was agreed between the two of you during the marriage, and with the benefit of your children at the forefront of your minds. And so her ability to accrue pension during this period has also necessarily been limited. And so unless and until we're able to resolve these financial issues and everybody knows what's happening, Sandra does feel again very strongly in terms of the pensions that all of the contributions are open for us to discuss today.
Thank you, Maddie. Is there anything you'd like to say?
No, I think Maddie's covered everything
Okay.
I wanted to say.
I'd just like to ask you very briefly about Sam and Florence. They've referenced how important the children are. Said that Florence is shy. Can you tell me just a little bit about them? They've managed okay during. How are they doing? You've been separated a long time.
Yeah, I think obviously my main worry, they're my responsibility. I treat them as my main responsibility, and Florence is very shy. She struggles with change. She is managing okay since we separated, but I'm concerned that changes do knock her off kilter, and I am concerned about her settling into a new school, and our agreement as a family was always that I would take that caring responsibility, that caring role of the family, and I want to make sure that I can continue to do that while she needs me.
And how do you feel Sam's getting on?
Yeah, he's doing okay. He's a different child, very sporty. He seems to be doing okay.
Good, okay. And
That's fair, yeah. I mean, Florence does settle once she's in somewhere and she knows where she is, but she is also
takes
shy.
a little while,
They're a little bit chalk and cheese, the pair of them, but absolutely at the forefront of this is getting their needs settled and sorted.
Okay, well that seems to be something you both agree on, so that's a really good start. And I've heard actually from each of you some areas in which you're willing to compromise, so I've got a lot of positive confidence about today, and let's start to explore some of those possibilities in our separate rooms. So as I say, I'm going to meet with Joe and Graham first so I can understand a bit more about the businesses. I'll come back to the two of you. It won't be longer than 20 minutes. And you've talked about the time frame for you being able to increase your income, Sandra. So perhaps if I could just ask the two of you to, you may have already thought about this in a lot of detail, but if you're able to think about what sort of time frame you're looking at, then when I come back, I'll ask you how you've got on with that. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we'll just break out into our separate rooms now then. Thank you all.